So this evening, I'm really excited to announce that Nikki Pope, a millionaire client of mine, she used to be a solicitor working for Bolton Council, is going to be interviewed by me for my series of business and property business lockdown rescue webinars, which is starting at 6 o'clock this evening. It's really exciting because Nikki is very, very experienced landlord. She worked for Bolton Council as their solicitor for their tenant problems. So she's very experienced in that department. She has her own portfolio in Blackpool, and she has her own portfolio in London. More recently, over the last 2 years, she's bought 30 properties in the Manchester area, and she's bought them for around £2 million. They're valued at £5 million because every single one she's bought, refurbished, added value, pulled all her money back out. So very exciting strategy. Is she still doing it now? Is it still working in the current climate? What problems is she having with her HMO rooms? Brilliant to speak to her because she's so experienced, and also she's always great fun. I know recently she did I think she swam from England to France, and she's done quite a lot of charity work as well, some really weird and wonderful stuff. She also acquired 17 lease option deals in 2009 after coming on a course some years ago, which we'll share a little bit about. She used to drive around in a beaten up old Lada, and I had to persuade her to buy a nicer car because, after all, who is going to let them take over a mortgage if you're driving around in a £200 car? But that's a whole different thing. I look forward to interviewing her tonight. If you want to listen to that interview, all you need to do is click on the link below, and we'll keep you up to date with what's going on in the current climate. Property business lockdown rescue every Monday to Friday, 6 o'clock in the evenings, every single night, helping you in your business and property business through this troubled time. Welcome to my daily business and property business lockdown rescue webinar. And tonight I'd like to introduce you to Nikki Pope, started off as a client, and sorry, let's just jump off of that. Sorry, I just had a technical one. Right, everything's just jumped to there. Where's the webinar scroll thing? There it is. Okay, let's show screen and let's roll again. Okay, so yeah, Nikki, who started off as a client of mine around about 2009, and has ended up to be quite a good friend. We've had a few property adventures over the years. But Nikki, very good evening to you.
Good evening.
And your background, I think when you first joined us, you were working for a council in their as a solicitor for them in their property department.
You've remembered very well. I was the senior lawyer for Bolton Council, and I was specialising in housing, although the kind of housing that I did for the council was very different to looking after my own portfolio. And in the 10 years before we met, I'd spent developing a very vanilla, functional but not exciting buy-to-let portfolio. And we met shortly after the financial crisis, really. So I was.
I'm just losing you a little bit. It's like you've just moved your laptop, and you seem to have a lot of noise going on your background.
I'm wondering. I've got earphones. I'm wondering
Yeah, that's much better now.
Is this better? Is this clearer?
Much better.
Okay, good. I'll get rid of the earphones. Yeah. So we met shortly after the financial crisis had really started to bite, and a lot of landlords were in significant pain. And that's the crisis that we were in then, crisis where danger and opportunity meet. So, you know, we've come a whole cycle together, Glenn. We're back for looking for more strategies, I guess.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things, I think you came on a day we did when we were doing rent to rent kind of stuff and lease option deals. Yeah, it was lease option deals, wasn't it?
You and Sarah presented a lease option day, which I found fascinating.
Yeah.
But in the end, you helped me structure a deal that started off as a lease option, but ended up as a delayed completion. So I think what I learned then was the importance of being open to learning. The more you know, the more you can grow. But also the importance of staying connected with people that can rethink things. Because in the middle of that deal, weren't.
Sorry, we lost you there. You faded out. I got in the middle of the deal.
Yeah, well, in the middle of that deal, as the enormity of it was about to happen, just to put this into context,
Yeah.
you know, it took me probably the best part of 10 years to make my first million, and 3 weeks after attending your course, I was about to do a deal that was going to be worth £1.5 million for no money down. I was pretty apprehensive. I think that's the kindest you can possibly say. I was bricking it.
I think I remember the conversation with you, because you brought the gentleman that you bought the properties along to the office for me to help you to negotiate it, and I seem to remember giving you some sort of lecture at the end, because as you got closer and closer to realising the deal was actually going to happen, you started sliding down your seat, and your body language was like not the best for a negotiation. And you'd not long bought...
You could be right, Glenn.
You'd also not long bought a new car, because you were very Warren Buffett-esque in that you weren't really into cars or anything. You had like a car that I think was some sort of Lada or a Russian car.
Yeah, I've got a Skoda, and it was 10 years old and doing me proud. And you persuaded me that people would take me more seriously if I upgraded my car, and you were right. You absolutely were right. Since then, I've driven mainly Mercedes. I think I did switch to a Lexus for a while, but having a good car gives people the confidence that you can manage your money and their money too. So you were right for that one for sure.
Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing over the last couple of years, because you've got in the background you've got your Blackpool HMO portfolio, and you've got a few properties in London. But when we spoke earlier on, you've been doing, and you've bought over 30 properties in Manchester over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think what I really took from the financial crisis was that it is really important to have a different variety of strategies. And when you know different strategies, you can just move from one to another very quickly. And sometimes I use all of the strategies in the toolbox, and sometimes I know none of them. But I can quickly move from, look, if something works as a vanilla buy-to-let without doing anything fancy, then why complicate it? If you can still buy in that way, then that's great. For me, property is very much about achieving the lifestyle that I want. So unless it's going to have something like high capital, like London, I now don't buy anything that is more than half an hour drive away, because I don't need to. So that has changed the kind of properties that I buy, and I've bought in an area that I identified had been in a way price capped by having too much local housing allowance, housing benefits in the area, but there was an underlying group of young people that would like to buy. A couple of years ago, I was on a show called Climbing the Property Ladder. So for a year, the TV programme just followed me and my partner Kate doing flips, which was great. And it was, you know, six-figure great at the end of a year, but it's a lot of hard work. And so really, I think for me, the lifetime strategy is actually buying to keep. So that's what we did. We bought properties and did them to a higher standard than most of the other landlords in the area, and then we're able to get a higher rent. And on the back of that, the second part of what I think you need to survive COVID crisis strategies, you need solutions. And we've developed property to a very high standard, so we have really good relations with our tenants, and we look for win-win situations. So we've given them great properties.
I hate tenants.
And that's working at the moment because
yeah, go on, sorry.
Sorry, Beth. I couldn't hear that. Yeah, so basically we bought a load of 2 up, 2 downs at a relatively good price, added value, taken the refurb money out, and that's a really lovely, sustainable business. It's not the most creative, but it's working really nicely.
No, I've got quite a lot of clients who are doing that through agents in the cheaper areas and through like below market value advertising in the 120 grand 3-bed price brackets. In the cheaper areas, then they come through estate agents. You can do them up, you can refinance them, and I understand you're getting all of your money back out, not a lot over the top of your money, but you're getting it back, so you're getting a free property that then gives you cash flow for life.
That's basically it. Yeah, it's not like the good old days where you could pull lots of cash out. And we have had a very wrecked project that we did develop and we did pull the cash out. But the time that it took to turn that whole project around, whereas with our little refurbs, we make our money work really hard. You know, we can be in and out of a house in 4 weeks to 8 weeks. And that compared to the larger project that took over a year to get planning permission.
Yeah.
And you taught me years ago, sometimes if you go fishing for whales, you might have lost a lot of small catch. You know, that sometimes the value is in lots of small properties that you can do really quickly. So that was a lesson that stuck with me. Yeah. Bread
and butter. So, okay, so you've got yourself a nice little niche. You've got yourself a great income. You're never going to have to work again. You've been travelling the world, and along comes this virus thing and lockdown. What everyone's interested to see is business continuing as normal? Are you still able to be doing things, or have you just closed everything down at the moment? And what would you say to them they should be doing right now, while many people have given up and just decided to sideline everything?
No, it's back to that earlier comment. Crisis represents the point where danger and opportunity meet. So sure, there is a crisis, and absolutely, until a month ago I had 3 teams of builders working for me. Now I only have 1.5. For me personally, the area that I was buying in had become almost overheated, and I was planning that I would have to look at another strategy. But I think actually, in the aftermath of this crisis, there will be a small dip, and there will be more people wanting to sell, or there will be spaces, for example, office to resi. You know, there's going to be a lot of businesses that decide, if they can survive, they'll decide that they've discovered that using Zoom and online strategies, they don't need the offices, so they will become available. what we have focused on is providing great space for key workers, and the key workers are desperate for self-contained, good quality accommodation. So that has become very quickly important. Just in the last month, we've been really focusing on helping key workers.
So
And
what's
also in
the
terms of the builders that we work with,
what's the average price you've been paying for a property? Give us some rough numbers for everybody.
So most of the houses that we bought last year were sub 100, and I think the most expensive one we bought was just over 130, generally 100 to 130, and we're spending in the region of 30,000 on a refurb, and we're getting them valued for between 165 and 250.
And they're coming
So
from
there is-
estate agents or from below market value advertising?
We have good relations with estate agents. Some of it is from other people that supply services to landlords. They're often the ones that know if a landlord's got a portfolio. And when we do the properties up, and we are spending probably 50% more than we need to spend, but we're doing things like putting quartz kitchens in because they have a lifetime guarantee. When we put a shower in, we choose the one that's guaranteed for 20 years. I mean, I'm 52 now, and I want to try and set and forget as much as possible. I don't want to have to redo everything every 5 years, and we're just finding that by spending a little bit more on materials, we're getting a lovely finish on the property and a choice of really, really lovely tenants. So we're really grateful for the win-win relationships that we have, and they've been really useful in weathering the storm so far. Over 99% of our tenants paid rent this month, for example.
Okay, what's been the difference for you in the last 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah, well, I suppose going from 3 teams of builders to 1.5 teams it focuses quite quickly. The difference is, I think it's almost about perception, because this crisis feels very different to the financial crisis of 10 years ago.
Have you got any remortgages
And I
going
think it
on?
will grow up.
And has that been affected?
We work hard. Yeah, so we work hard to have good relationships with our lenders, and they know us very well. They know the quality that we deliver, and so that has continued well. We haven't had any interruption in financial services. It's got a little bit more difficult as people are working from home, and surveyors are moving from on-site valuations to desktop. But so far, we haven't been affected, but we anticipate that we might be affected. So there is a slowdown, but for us, that's an opportunity just even to think of different things. So, for example, we're tinkering with Zoom, and we're doing rents by doing online viewings of the properties, and we will become more focused on upfront prep, so making sure that people are really ready to sign a tenancy agreement, and I think it will streamline how we operate in the future. Yeah.
Okay, that's so your HMO rooms. How are you doing viewings and that? If anybody that you're doing them by Zoom, and people are actually signing the tenancy agreements and moving in without actually seeing them?
Well, there is an element of disruption there, and I think there's an element of compromise. One of my houses was very lucky in a sense, in a weird kind of way. The tenants in that particular house were affected earlier than most. 4 and 6 went down, and one of the housemates there was fabulous and looked after everyone. So they managed to find an incoming tenant for me when there was a change in who was going to stay where. So they sorted that for themselves, and we've kind of agreed to close that house for a while.
Okay.
And another of my houses, I did have a room come available last week, and because 5 out of 6 are very stable, they've asked me not to rent the room for this period of time. And look, I could rent the room, but I'm not going to, because I've got 5 good payers who are very happy there.
Yeah.
They're very reasonable people, and everyone's got to make some compromises to get through, and to have happy relations with tenants is better than having 3 tenants leave at once, you know. So that is an element of compromise, but on the other hand, it's offset by a reduction in interest rates. So it's not all plain sailing, but I mean, the idea of opportunity in crisis isn't that it's all plain sailing. The idea is that you look at the crisis and that you work out who is having problems. And in my experience, if you can identify those problems and think through what those solutions might be, you get well rewarded for providing solutions to other people's problems. And again, guided by you, and thank you, Glenn, with the portfolio deal that you helped me with, that was very much about creating a win-win scenario to help someone's problems go away. And we still have a positive relationship. I still have a very positive relationship with the seller. That's 11 years down the line. He came to my wedding. When I swam the Catalina Channel from Catalina to LA, I have to say that was a week before a great white snapped a kayak in too, and there I was doing my 21 miles. But job was land support. So I think if you understand that when you solve people's problems, you can be connected with them for a long period of time.
Yeah, and that's what we did, didn't we? We solved his problem and structured it in. I think from memory, going back to that, you'd got yourself a certain amount of profit doing it the way you're doing it, and I kind of looked at it and said, actually, Nikki, if you do it like this, you're going to make, you know, hundreds of thousands rather than part of 100,000.
Well, I'd structured a really nice 5-year lease option deal, assuming that the recovery would be much sooner than it actually happened. So really, thank heavens, Glenn, you moved it from why do a lease option? This guy's got 20-year mortgages left at really cheap finance. Why not just exchange now and complete later? And even if I never purchased the properties, just the cash flow alone from 10 years of that is fantastic. And then there is capital benefit as well. So yeah, it's interesting. Just a few words on a contract. The deal substantially agreed as a lease option. You moved it over to looking at, well, if he's agreeing a lease option, why wouldn't he give you an exchange with a delayed completion? That has meant a monumental difference in the profitability of the deal.
Yeah,
so,
I remember another bit
exchange
about it.
with delayed completion, fabulous.
I remember another bit about it is you were trying to do I think you were trying to negotiate the whole package as one, and I said, look, why don't you just pick one property and negotiate that and then copy it across all of the units?
Yeah, and I think that helps, and that actually goes towards my final main point for helping people survive COVID and improve all business is about simplifying things. So very often in the eye of a storm, in the eye of a deal, you need to work out the most simple thing that you need to do to still be in the game. Yeah. And if that works, it will probably work for other things too.
Brilliant. Okay.
So being relaxed and focus is a real key.
For definite. Look, there's one more question I'm going to ask you in just a second, but before I do, if anybody's got any questions, you can either type them in the chat box. That is restricted to the number of words you can put in, so it does tend to run out of words, or you can pop your hand up and I'll come to you and you can ask Nikki. As I said, she's been a landlord for many, many years. She's very, very experienced. She's was a solicitor up until when she became financially free and left work, which was quite a celebration. And yeah, so while I wait for some questions to come in, I think we'll have a bit of fun and run through the deal that we nearly did. You phoned me up and said, Glenn, I've got this block of flats in Stratford. It was right in meltdown 2009. There was over 100 flats and it was about £12 million or something, the whole purchase. And you've phoned and said come down and meet the estate agent and meet the owner. And I've come down, and fortunately we decided that you were going to be bad cop and I was going to be good cop in the negotiation. And I'll let you take over from that bit.
Yeah, I think the deal was actually on the market for between 65 and 80 million. And we managed to agree a reduction on that. It was a very strange scenario because I was having an estate agent day with you, Glenn, in London, and I'd spoken to all these posh people in posh offices and got absolutely nowhere. And I'd said, look, I've got these really dodgy guys in the East End of London. I don't know if you really want to meet them. And you right away realised that it was the independents with their own view of what was right that could be where we'd find a deal.
Yeah, I remember now that there was a 12 million write-off. His bank were prepared to write off 12 million. And we were going to buy the whole package, but back to back it with investors, giving them a discount and paying him back more than he was going to get some cash back on the deals after his bank write-off.
Yeah, I think the profit was going to be, minimum profit was going to be 12 million. The overall deal would have been a lot more, but the minimum profit would have been 12 million, which I think we'd agreed to split. We got so close. But along the way, we had so much fun and we learned so much. The initial estate agents were so keen to stay in the deal that they didn't look at the nature of their client, and I could see steam coming out of his ears as this little estate agent was trying to block us from doing a deal. And in the end, their client kind of threw them out of the room and just left you, me and him together. And it was only later, actually, that someone drew to our attention that the guy that we'd agreed to purchase from had earned the nickname The Bomber when he was in prison in Northern Ireland, because apparently he bombed his way out of every prison that he was held in. So we ended up dealing with a hardcore property developer, Tom McFeely, with former affiliations to the IRA. So that was interesting. We realised that we didn't want any part of the deal to go wrong, because I think we both were quite attached to our legs.
I remember him asking me and saying to me, so how do I know I'm going to get my 5 million back at the end of this? And I said to him, I know who you are. And he said, okay, as long as we understand that, that's all right then. But you dragged me into that one, Nikki. That was just like interesting. And we needed that bank.
Well, he's certainly not the kind of guy that you'd mess about. I think, and looking at it, we were really unlucky not to get it.
Yeah, we needed, because of the down valuations.
We were right on the map.
Yeah, because we had the properties on different floors valued. I think we picked 4 or 5 different floors, and they all come in slightly undervalued. And we went to get him to go back to his bank, and I think to write off an extra 2 million on all they were doing. It was the Bank of Ireland, and if they'd have done that, it would have all gone ahead.
Yeah. But it was a really interesting experience for me to realise that where most people are competing is not necessarily where the best deals are, sometimes going right at the top. And I think that is something that's going to be interesting in the next, is actually learning how to do deals. In essence, Tom couldn't hold the deal because the bank was controlling it behind him, but actually learning how to do deals with the banks will be interesting.
Yeah, we've done a few over the years, but they're never that easy to deal with, and they're difficult to get cash back at the end or get discounts because everything's got to be traditionally purchased. Anyone's got any questions for you, Nikki?
Maybe I could clarify how the money really works on the exchange and the delayed completion.
Yeah, go on.
The mortgages that I was taking over, one of the things that who is a very, very lovely man, but the seller was in a dreadful position because the mortgages were 2% above base when base was above 5%.
Yeah.
So he was paying over 7% on his mortgages, and that was really, really difficult for him. And then what happened during the course of the negotiations, when he just lost his interest in owning the properties because his life had moved on, he was about to get married, he was not going to live in the area, his life was moving away from wanting these properties. During the course of all that, interest rates dropped right down to 0.5%. And that was when Glenn really said to me, look, the money isn't just in the price that you're paying. The money is the financial vehicle that you're driving. So if you can suddenly be controlling all this portfolio with mortgages that are 2% above base, so you're only paying 2.5%, not 7%, that's where the money is. Why would you only want that extra money for 5 years when you could have that extra money for 20 years? And that is £250,000 difference, just that. So that's how, across the portfolio, exchange with a delayed completion, even if I never buy, I'm 11 years into the deal, just structuring it in that way. And it's also better for certainty as well, because exchange and completion is a standard process. Exchange with a delayed completion is common in commercial property. It's not normal in BTL, but it's not unheard of. So it's much easier for a lot of other professionals like solicitors.
Yeah, I was lucky that I managed to do a few of them on mortgages that were repayment mortgages. So the tenants are paying down the mortgage, and at the end of the 20-odd year period, I end up owning the house for just £1, which I did several of them going back to 2009 time. But yeah, it is definitely using the life of the mortgage rather than, everyone was just doing 5 years, because it seems a long time when you're doing it, but it goes very quickly.
Totally. Everyone teaching lease options was teaching 3 to 5 years, and the advice was don't go beyond 5 years. And I think, Glenn, that's when I particularly respected the fact that you don't go along with what everyone else is saying. You will say the emperor has no clothes if you think he's wearing no clothes. You just called it out. Well, why wouldn't you have a 20-year deal? Everyone else was saying keep them shorter, keep them under control. You don't know what will happen in the future. And I remember you being very relaxed with me, saying, well, look at Japan. The interest rates in Japan have been flat for years. I reckon ours are going to be flat for a long time. And anyway, what's the worst that can happen? And so I think that's the strategies that I learned in the eye of the storm in the last financial crisis, the need to be flexible and the need to continue to think what works and what doesn't. Those points, those principles are actually more important than the individual solutions, because as long as we need housing, there will be a need to provide housing. You just need to work out which game to play at any given point in time.
Yeah, for definite. Okay, Gareth has just said, can you say the 250 grand over 20 years again as you broke up?
So basically the benefit to me in structuring the deal as an exchange with a delayed completion was an extra £250,000, and that's without capital gain.
Yeah, because when you do buy these
And that takes
properties,
into account.
if you buy them, you are going to have higher base rates, aren't you? You're going to have it'll be base rate plus 4 or 5% when you refinance them, so they'll be a lot dearer. But you've got the choice of selling them and lifting quite a large profit out of them from the capital appreciation over the 20 odd years you've owned them or controlled them. And it gives you the choice to
Exactly.
do.
I could sell them.
So Maggie's talking about.
I'm actually planning to buy them and probably keep them.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So Maggie has asked, my question was regarding stamp duty when exchanging with delayed completion. Okay, right, technically Maggie, when you exchange contracts and something called substantial performance is deemed to have taken place, or you get benefit from the properties because you're renting them, or if you actually move in and have benefit from moving in, then substantial performance deemed to take place means that stamp duty is supposed to take place at exchange. However, not many solicitors actually know about that. And I don't know, Nikki, when your solicitors exchange contracts and all of them, did you pay stamp duty at that point, or have you still got to pay stamp duty on completion?
No, and maybe I should have paid at that point, because maybe I wouldn't have to pay it now. Basically, I will get the benefit from. So, in fact, at the time that I was initially negotiating the deal, the multiple dwellings benefits weren't in force. So I can't see that I'll avoid paying 3% when I buy. But the deal is that I only pay for the properties what the seller paid in the first instance.
Yeah.
And the benefit to him is he was about to hand the keys back to the lender and lose £250,000. But when I eventually buy, he will get his £250,000 back, and then I will have to pay 3% is what I'm expecting to pay. Yeah, but that's okay, because I haven't really had to pay that money. I've let the property earn that money. You know, in the time period that I've managed it, the property's been paying for its own refurbs, maintenance, and I'm not going to close the deal until it's earned enough to pay for all the costs.
Yeah.
So
we had an interesting learning from one of our clients the other week. They did a deal of several £1 million, and normally when you're dealing with high street lenders, they insist the solicitors pay the sort of stamp duty out on completion. But with bridging companies, they don't necessarily insist upon it. So because it was a development project, they bought something worth several £1 million. They didn't pay the stamp on it. Okay? They did the work, they developed the property, they sold the properties, and then they went back and paid the stamp, which was, quite a few hundreds of thousands of pounds after they sold all the properties, and they had a whole £300 fine for not paying it on time.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to do what you need to do to survive. And actually, there's a story that I would like to share. I'm a swimmer. I'm quite an extreme swimmer. Last year I swam to France, a solo swim, and it was probably one of the toughest slots of the season. There was a huge storm, and it was early in June, so the water wasn't warm. But I learned from the previous year I'd swum my first ever ice mile, which involves classic costume, goggles, cap, nothing else. And I wasn't nearly enough prepared. Now I'm much more prepared when I do ice miles. But As I was coming on the final lap, I felt my breathing was almost finishing and I was almost drowning. And I just thought, I'm going to count to 10. I'm not going to stop, I'm going to count to 10. I could get to 7. And then I thought, I'm going to count to 10. And this time I could only swim to 5 strokes. And the third time, I only got to 3 strokes. And I thought, this would be a terrible way for my son to watch his mother drown. I really don't want to drown in front of my only son. So I refocused, and all I could do was to swim 1 stroke at a time. I've got a very happy memory of my son and one of his friends counting trees, 1 and 1 and 1. And so I literally swam 1 stroke at a time, 1 and 1 and 1. And I think I still have the UK record for the longest ice mile, but I made it. Because at the point when I was drowning, because I was so cold, I just focused on what I needed to survive, and it was breathe. Breathe 1 stroke, breathe 1 stroke. And I think that might even help people coming through COVID. It looks like most of us will become infected at some stage. And knowing that when it's absolutely critical to be relaxed and just focus on what you absolutely need to do, which is to breathe. But in business terms, to take a step back and consider, in the eye of the storm, what is mission critical for your business to survive? And it's likely to be around cash flow. And if you take the steps that you need to survive moment by moment, not thinking far ahead or far behind, but just what in that moment you need to do, then you will get through. And for those of us that do get through, there will be some really interesting opportunities. And personally, I do believe that the more that we can help other people, the more we will be rewarded for that. So we're in interesting and difficult times, but they're not disastrous for all of us.
No, I've got some of my clients who've got tenants who can't pay because they're not working, and they've come for 3-month payment holidays, and they've gone to the building society for 3-month payment holidays. So yes, it's all got to be sorted out at a later date, but you know, if you keep your cash flow going with permission to not pay rather than just not paying, then that's going to keep your credit good as well.
Well, and there might have to be some radical strategies, like the mortgage holiday. Banks are applying that differently. But if you're providing HMO accommodation, you might be having to provide a lot of bills. Well, if you switch off the direct debit for 2 months, what happens? You know, you might have to. I'm not saying that people won't have to make difficult, dangerous decisions, but if switching off all the bills for 2 months helps you get through, it's equivalent really to dodging the stamp duty. It's not ideally model behaviour, but you have to work out what you need to do moment to moment to get through. And so I think tough decisions will have to be made, but whatever the nature of the decision, if you can keep yourself relaxed, you will make better decisions.
Yeah, Mark Connolly said, with such a large portfolio, how do you manage your debt?
Well, I've taken quite a while. I mean, I'm a bit of a slow boat. My portfolio has been developed over 20 years, so I'm leveraged, or I'm not leveraged too high, and a lot of my mortgages are quite low. But the real trick is I have really lovely tenants, and so and I have quite a mix. So some of my lovely tenants, for example, worked for Ryanair, and I'm really impressed. One particular host was laid off very early, and he was understandably worried about his rent, and he had no real idea how to even claim for benefits, because it's not his culture to claim for benefits. So we advised him what he could do, if he needed to, and just to stay in touch. Anyway, he paid his rent yesterday. He told me he's just got a job as an Amazon driver. So actually having really good communications with your tenants and being available to help them, but that doesn't always mean accepting that the only choice is not to pay your rent, because it's a holiday. It's not a forever solution, is it? People are still liable for that debt.
Yeah.
So I would rather help someone work through the benefits system, work through a payment plan, than give them a CCJ at the end of the day that's going to hurt their financial record. You know, I would rather help them through it.
Yeah, of course. Okay, all right. Anything you'd like to add, Nikki, to wrap up? We've come to the end of our 45 minutes. The questions that have been asked, you've answered very nicely. Anything you'd like to finish up with?
No, Glenn, thank you for inviting me to share some of my experiences. I think it's strange that we met, you know, shortly after one crisis, and we're now looking at another. There are undeniably going to be some horrific stories, and this time, you know, it involves people dying. It's not just money. And so obviously we are facing some really tough times, but I really believe that as much as we can help each other, and, you know, we're trying to help our tradesmen, our tenants, and they are really helping us. If you can find a way of creating a win-win situation, and also to understand that a lot of people are really panicking, and so that if you can be calm and unlock their panic, unlock their fears.
Continue swimming with one stroke, one breath.
Solutions. One stroke, one breath, one stroke at a time. And God forbid if you get COVID yourself, keep breathing. Just relax as much as you can.
Yeah,
breathe in. Whilst you're breathing, you're living, and that's a good sign.
I'm actually, because of my asthma, I'm actually one of the high-risk categories. I remember my asthma when I was young was a lot worse than it is now, and I used to be at a window just trying to take breath and air and just staying relaxed through the whole thing. And again, I survived because I was relaxed through it, exactly what you said. So, right, Nelson, thank you very much for joining us, Nikki, and sharing your experiences and, you know, your tenant challenges that you're having at the moment. Everyone will be very appreciative of your chat with them. Very much appreciate if everybody could, glenn@glenarmstrong.com, drop me a some sort of testimonial email, how you found it, give me some feedback. Tomorrow I'm interviewing a mortgage broker who's dealing with stuff in the current market, and speaking to him today. Some lenders are still lending, some are doing desktops, but give you a chance to ask him any questions you've got tomorrow. So thank you, Nikki, for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great night, and most importantly, stay safe out there. Take care, and I'll speak with you all tomorrow evening at 6.